Yo! Video games.
What up, dudes, and welcome back to the YoVideogames podcast. I'm Matt.
And I'm Andrew.
And once again, thank you to all our generous patrons who kept us going for over 400 episodes.
Yeah, we're on episode 401. Good God. But if you're interested in becoming a patron at any level, please check out patreon.com/YoVideogames podcast. Dude of the week is Machuzu. Thank you, Machuzu.
Thank you, Machuzu.
And as always, we have a sponsor to thank. Of course, we're talking about Manscaped, and I have in my hand our current favorite product by Manscaped, the Beard Hedger Pro. And there's a lot of reasons we love about it, but probably the top two things. One, it holds a charge forever.
For a long time, uses USB-C, no weird, proprietary charging dock or charging cable.
And it's a small cable. It all fits inside of, my charging cable's in the bathroom, but it all fits in a travel case, real clean, easy. And you don't have, the other thing we love most about it is you don't have to remove the guard to adjust.
Yeah, it on and off, all these different sizes or whatever. Just a dial. You
don't have to carry like 10 guards and have a pouch and some bullshit. It's all one. It's all one package.
Unit. You're just good to go and works really. It's really sharp. It really works.
Yeah. Have you used it without the guard to like get your mustache? Do not put pressure. I'm just gonna say that.
Oh, I know. It's very much like you be careful. You hold it because it works. Oh, it works very well.
And then we got its little brother for your little brother, the lawnmower.
Oh, I got big brother.
Yeah, I mean, you call it the big brother if you want. This guy, technically both are safe in the shower. This guy's way more waterproof though, because it doesn't have any ports or anything. I still haven't had the balls to try it like directly under the water, and I haven't tried the Beard Hedger in the shower yet. But supposedly wet's fine. But
yeah, and ignore what I said about how sharp the Beard Hedger was, because the lawnmower is very soft and gentle. Because it is going over your nuts in your tree.
It's got anti-nick technology.
Yes.
Which is important. You don't want to clip that taint. A taint.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I can say, it's definitely I've never been nicked by the lawnmower, so.
I don't know if you've ever done that in the past, but God, does that burn. But you don't have to worry about it with the lawnmower, and you don't have to worry about it, especially with the Beard Hedger Pro. I've never tried it on my balls, but I'm not saying you can't. Your mileage may vary.
If you're adventurous.
If you want to check out in either of these products, please use our code YoVG, all caps, at manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping. That's YoVG, all caps, at manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping. Your balls will thank you.
Indeed.
I mean, unless you try to get like real deep in there. I don't know. I don't know how fancy have you gotten with trimming your balls? Like, if you tried to do like arrows, a bunny?
No, I've never done it. I've never gone into the customization artwork. I'm not much of a customization guy.
No landscaping.
Not in any game. Because anytime a game has customization, I kind of just like gloss over. I'm like, oh, whatever. Speaking of customization and gaming, though, a big one recently came out. Obviously, Baldur's Gate 3. It's basically a D&D simulator from everything I've seen about it, which is not much, but
it's fantastic.
It's definitely create a character, create a class, and like you have like this big long ass D&D campaign. You can play it with your friends. I watched a friend group, going through it recently. So I got a little tiny bit of like, this is how it looks, this is how it plays. Very cool. I want nothing to do with it personally.
How dare you?
Like, holy shit, does this not look like anything I want to personally do? But I'm super ecstatic that it exists.
Do you not like D&D in general? You just don't like Dungeons and Dragons, like tabletop RPGs?
You really need a solid group. Like, it's really dependent on that. And then in a video game form, I kind of lose interest because I like having a narrative that's kind of like full of twists and turns. It's full of variety. I don't really like the whole. It gets really hard when a narrative is so broad scope that it's kind of because the game has 17,000 different possible ending outcomes,
Right. Yeah.
and I'm just kind of like it's almost like it's too much. Too much choice. It's too broad. It's too just kind of like you could do this and this happens and then what do you do? Do you kick the squirrel or do you not kick the squirrel? And I'm just kind of like holy shit, like too much choice. I'm like because here's the thing, because what some people crave more than anything is they want this true sandbox experience. This adventure is
Right.
unique to me. I had this unique, wonderful experience. All these choices I made were unique and wonderful, and I made my whole adventure like it's not going to be like anyone else's. Blah blah. And I actually really I kind of like a curated, narrative driven story. I like really getting into okay, we're going to design a game. We do all this world building, and then you put a bunch of basically avatar, and you yourself are basically just like this blank avatar, and you basically just you're put in this playground, and you interact with the playground. But I kind of like having themes in a game. I like having a game has something to say, in a way, and I like having lots of twists and turns and things that you don't see coming, and like I like having like character narrative arcs and shit. You don't get that in a fucking CRPG because it's counterintuitive to
Oh
the whole
no,
fucking
I think
experience.
you do get that. You also get that in a D&D campaign.
You can, but you're not fucking getting that, is in your creative character. I know games have tried, and there's like the coder thing, like, did you know you're really the reincarnation of Darth Malik or whatever the fuck? And they're all kind of like basics, or like, and to me, it's kind of like, okay, that's nice. It's like you're not gonna get some weird fucking like narrative twist kind of thing where I'm like, I want to have this weird, goofy philosophical point I want to drive home in this
Well,
game, that you get because your characters have like this very, very linear defined, structure to like how we're building this, like how the story's supposed to go kind of thing. It's like you have a playground, you know, that by nature that means we're not going to do anything fucking nutty in the game.
I think you like I understand what you're saying where you like a pointed narrative that,
Yeah.
someone is clearly telling you a story. They're not expecting you to experience the world and build your own story.
It's kind of, to me, it's just like an apple oranges thing,
Yeah, I'm
where it's like, I don't want to sit there and be like, you came across a crossroad and then what do? I used this and I rolled and then I did this and I chose to pick a chair up and I chose to start a bar fight.
well, let's say like so there's like a Curse of Strahd is a good example of a D&D campaign where like it's mostly broad. You're just kind of like in this world and you find out the story by investigating the world.
Right.
But the story is there and it's like an epic, far-reaching story. You're piecing it together before you become involved.
Yeah, because it usually
you
boils
choose
down.
how much involvement you are.
Well, maybe I'm like with like an Elder Scrolls game, which is basically D&D. It's kind of like we have this. There's this character or this thing. There's like kind of like this narrative endpoint, right? An end goal, if you will.
Right.
And it's usually just about like there's no set way to get there. Now, for some people, this is what they love about it. There was no guided way for me to get to the end point and defeat the bad guy, which is really at the end of the day that's what it is. Like with you watch the Morrowind speedrunner, right?
Right.
And what they do is they get off the boat, they run to the guy who's falling out of the sky, get the levitation spell, levitate to like the middle of the island or whatever, run down into the last cave, do a thing, throw the magic chalice into the fucking thing or whatever, and kill the last, just beeline it right for where the last boss is, do the thing that caused him to die or whatever, and then boom, he's got the ending. Like the narrative structure of that game was there was a bad guy, and this guy just he already knew ahead of time where he was and everything, and he just ran over and killed him.
Yeah,
and it's like that's so cool. Look how open ended it is, and for me, I'm like, it is very cool, but it also makes me feel like you're a floating icon that's basically more or less hitting switches and pushing swings and going down slides, and you're kind of just you're put into a sandbox, you interact with the stuff, and at the end of the day, you climbed up to the top of the flagpole and raised the flag. You won.
Yeah, but that's not what's happening in Baldur's Gate 3.
I'm simplifying it a lot. I know I really am here.
I've only played about 15 hours of it thus far, because like a D&D campaign, if you're going to play with a group, you kind of have to have like an established meeting time where you're going to play. That's been the thing slowing me down. I could just play it on my own if I wanted, but for instance, with like Divinity and stuff, which is sort of the progenitor of Baldur's Gate 3 for this, there is a very pointed story that you're like going along it, and you can change how the story progresses, how fast or how slow, or like your character gets certain choices based on how like evil you're being, or shit like that. Um but it is still a pretty curated story. It's not quite like you can't, in Baldur's Gate 3, you can't just run to the end and kill whoever. You can't kill the right person, right? At least as far as I know. You're still going through a story and going through areas, and it. I could see why you don't want that, because you can get bogged down in the choices.
Yeah, it's almost like it's like, oh my god, there's like so much things you can do or whatever, and then it's like, yeah, there is so much thing. Like, what should I be doing? There is no right answer. I'm like, cool. I'm gonna go play something else, because like,
you want a more curated experience.
It's like there's a billion things you can do, and how awesome is that? It is awesome, it really is. But I kind of just like, it's not about like losing focus. It's kind of like, what should I even be focusing on? Don't focus on anything. Just be you. Just do what your heart tells you. And I'm like, okay, like at some point I just get to the point where I'm like, I don't even know what I'm supposed to be doing anymore. I've been wandering around. Like, I kind of like did this. I wandered over here. I followed a goat over here. I went into a cave over here. Found a troll over here. I'm like, yeah, what a great adventure. Think of the story you're creating and telling. And I'm like, yeah, but it feels like nothing matters. Like nothing. I mean, nothing does matter. I mean, it just feels like I was kind of in a playground, doing things, interacting with things, and it kind of just, I don't know, like urgency, I guess, is kind of like, well, I get like, being so open ended makes me lose the sense of urgency a bit. Where I'm like,
yeah, I get that.
I guess, what am I supposed to like? I mean, sure, I could try. And you can focus. Like, yeah, you could focus on the main plot or whatever, but like, I guess it's like, are you ever going to get to a point in the game where like something really tragic happens that it brings you to fucking tears because of like how well acted or how well developed a character in your party was, and then like something tragic happens to them or whatever, you go through some shit together, like that is meant to happen, like it has to happen kind of thing, and it's like, boy, God, I remember that. That one cutscene. Like, I guess the big example is like, okay, it didn't hit me too hard, but like when Aerith died, right? And 7, it's like, it's this defining moment in video games. Spoilers, whatever the fuck. It's this defining moment where everyone fucking remembers it, right? It was like this huge fucking deal. It wasn't the ending of the game. It was just like, holy shit! Like, my main character got fucking ruthlessly, like, shish kebabbed, in the middle of the story,
and
kind of
thing. It sets a tone for the rest of it. Now imagine that the reason Aerith died is directly connected to a choice Cloud makes.
Right. And that's the thing, is like, when you made it like, oh, well, it's because of you went down this pathway, it kind of makes you feel like, so it kind of wasn't, it's kind of like, it loses like its meaning a bit when it's like, oh, it was the outcome of many player choices you made down the road. It's not actually like, it's it's not like it's not part of the story they're trying to tell. Like, it's not like this thing where we're using this as a major point that the main character has to go through as a character arc area. This is
but that's one of the impressive things
choice
about the
B game. Or choice B or choice D that you made instead of choice A or C. And having that option of choice makes it feel like so there's not really any sort of like right answer or way to do this. It's just
Well, no,
just,
I think that
I chose the wrong option at A, B, kind of thing is like,
no.
just,
So the way they build it is like the way it works in a D&D campaign, and the way they did it in Baldur's Gate 3, if they have a thing like that, based on how they do it in like Divinity and shit, is um based on your choices of who you're romancing,
mhm,
and you make the choices throughout the game where you're a renegade, say you're kind of a asshole, you make the hard choices, and in one of the choices, the choice you make directly results in a bunch of people dying, but also results in this character that you've been romancing for the entire game, they
yeah,
die, and now you get the motivation to stop doing those renegade things. Like, it literally weaves the story with you based on your
mhm.
choices, to where then, like, for the rest of the
But
game,
it
your
also,
story's a redemption arc.
but to me, it's like this weird, frustrating thing. It's like, okay, well, I'll just go back and reload a save. I'll give you an example. Mass Effect 1. Like I got to
Right.
this point where the reptilian guy dies. Like one of the people on my party who's like super racist, like
Yeah.
does this thing or what, it's like it's near the end of the game where it's like, oh, he wants to go do this thing, and like you have to shoot him or whatever. He dies in the scenario unless you did his side quest,
Hmm.
for the genophage or whatever the fuck it was called, right?
Yeah.
The disease is wiping out his race. Or if your charisma was high enough, you could talk him out of it, out of having to kill him or whatever, right?
Yeah.
You could
You're
talk him down.
Paragon.
Yeah, you either have to talk him down if you're high enough, or you have to have done his side quest. And I was like locked into this point where it's like, well, I can't go do his side quest. I don't have a save for that area. So I basically just had to like load an earlier save and then just respec all my points. I respec all my points into my charisma, and I talked him down so he didn't have to die. And it's like, whoa, man, like the choice was so big. And to me, it just felt like, so there's no actual narrative, like
Well, it's funny
story they're
enough.
trying to tell. They're just, we have these characters and we have all these different possible outcomes for them. Nothing feels like, to me it gets this feeling of like nothing feels like it's supposed to be. There is no supposed to be way. It's just a bunch of different A, B, C, D routes.
It's sort of funny that you bring that up, because if you choose to let him die in Mass Effect 1,
Yeah.
when you're playing Mass Effect 2, you can load in your Mass Effect 1 choices, and
Mm-hmm.
then that character isn't in Mass Effect 2,
2
but it
or 3.
changes an entire section of the game, of
Right.
like what you have to do to,
Right.
like,
And I was like, I'm like, he's like one of my best characters. I'm not letting him die because like I know that's kind of like the through line. And here's the real, I mean, to shit on Mass Effect, boy did they fuck up that end.
well,
What ends in 3 possible but very similar outcomes. So
I
that felt like a real cheat to like have all this like setup and all these different
yeah.
ways you could play through the trilogy to just end at the same fucking end point. Like, whoa.
I I the thing is like, I forget which episode we did, but somebody commented, "Oh, overhated," and I had made a joke about like, well, Mass Effect 2 gets the right amount of love, because in my memory, I was like, Mass Effect 2 is clearly the better of the three games. Um, but their response, I was like, oh, maybe I'll go replay Mass Effect. And man, I was thinking about like, this is what inspired me to want to talk about sequels today.
Yeah.
Uh, where I was like, Mass Effect 1 is sort of a clunky piece of shit. It's good, and especially for the time, there was like a lot of like uh you know really cool ideas, and I enjoyed the game a lot, and I still enjoyed it when I replayed it recently.
Yeah.
But the jump between 1 and 2, in terms of like how much better the game is built, and how much more the choices matter, and how many more crew members you have and shit like that,
Yeah.
is like,
Yeah.
it's fucking huge, right? And then I just started 3 again, replaying 3, cuz I don't actually remember a ton about 3, and your choices change quite a bit of like who's available in 3. If you get the legendary edition, it makes a hell of a lot clearer sense of through line than if it's been a
Yeah.
year.
The thing is like, to my knowledge, like 3 was actually pretty good up until the ending.
Yeah, the only thing I remember about 3 is the ending, and I realize it's like a 10 or 11-year-old game, so probably
Yeah.
doesn't matter to spoil this, but like, the good ending is your character dies. right? It's like, or if you don't die, I think you're like out in the great beyond, and
Yeah.
they don't like they
The
like
gates have been shut off or whatever, like the warp gates or something.
yeah.
I don't know.
And so everybody's separated and shit like that. I don't know. I'm replaying it now, but even then, from 2 to 3, the combat becomes so much more fluid in 3 compared to
Mhm.
2. Where like 2 was a step up from 1,
It
but like
really was.
it's still clunky. And then 3 is like it, you can very
Mm.
much see like, oh, they watched COD. Like they were like, oh, this is what people like. They want to be able to like
Interesting.
move
Because I
fluidly.
remember how, like, yeah, 2 is way better, but it still feels a little clunky. I remember feeling that about that. I never got to 3. I beat
Yeah.
1, and I was going through 2, and then I just lost interest.
I liked 2. I thought 2 had a pretty
I feel it
interesting
is
story, but
you know, and it's weird because I feel like 2 is, like, such a significantly better game than 1.
it is. It really kind of is. Mass Effect 1 is cool because up until that point I hadn't played a sci-fi game like that.
Yeah.
That I really, I thought did a great job. Granted, people like to say like KOTOR came first kind of
Mhm.
thing. Like, okay, yeah, absolutely. But in my opinion, the combat in Mass Effect 1 is still leagues better than what KOTOR was
Oh, for
doing.
sure.
But
I think so
they're
anyway.
also years apart too, so I don't want to like try and hold them up to each other. But
Yeah, well,
Mass Effect 2, its combat is just like significantly better.
better. Significantly
And
better.
also the just like the conversation options and like the
Conversation options and just, like, the way conversations are held in 2 are just so much better than 1.
cleaner, yeah.
Yeah, and clean well, 1 kinda made me realize, like, the problem I have with BioWare games, like, especially, like, early 3D BioWare, is the George Lucas shot, reverse shot of just, like, your
Yes.
character just like, "Bah, bah, 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 bah." And I'm like,
Well,
"Man, it's so boring to watch these characters talk."
in 2 it has like a good jump. There's still a little bit of awkwardness. One thing that I really liked about 2 is in 1 there's so obviously a good guy response. Like,
Yeah.
and in 2 that's still the same. If you always pick the top answer on the right side,
Mhm.
that's the good guy thing to say.
Yeah.
But it's less obvious what is the right answer, like just looking at the conversations. In 1, you know for a fact what the answer they want you to give is.
Yeah.
But in 2, like, you could either one could be the right thing to do, like just one's considered a renegade action and the other's paragon, but like there's sort of a real gray area there. 3 so far, it seems like it's gone back to the one where
Mm.
like it's very clear what is the right answer here. Um, yeah, but I've only played a couple
But
hours
that
of
leads into the
so.
the the interesting question because the topic you had, which was, like, what makes a sequel good?
Like, what do you
What
expect from a
what do you
sequel that'll
expect?
make it good?
And here's the thing. I wanna talk about 2 sequels and bring up 2 sequels that are as Max calls them, they are better in every way than the game that preceded them, but I don't remember them as much. They didn't leave as much of an impact, even though in every way, shape, and form, they are better games with better gameplay and better just everything, right?
Mhm.
Doom Eternal and God of War Ragnarok, where he was saying like Doom Eternal is in every way, shape, and form a better game than Doom 2016. However, I had more fun playing Doom 2016 and I remember it more. And he kind of felt Ragnarok was the same way. And I think Ragnarok has that issue of just like it's just too fucking long. Where it's like when and both of those games are kind of soft reboots of their franchises
Mm.
respectively, right? They really changed up they're big comeback games, right? Where like they're still the same game, but they kind of changed a lot of shit up. God of War more than Doom 2016. Um and
Yeah.
I kind of have to sort of agree in a sense where it's like Ragnarok was fucking great, but I feel like God of War 20 whatever 18
18, yeah.
kind of left a harder impact. Maybe because it was the first of its kind or
Right.
whatever, or maybe because it didn't feel like it dragged out beyond the point of it should have. Um
I would say that it's because they were fresh, and
yeah.
so they had this impact. I mean, one, Mick Gordon's soundtrack for Doom 2016 fucking slaps. Like,
Yeah.
it hits so hard, it makes you want to rip and tear. Like,
Yeah.
you just want, like, every time that music kicks in that game, it feels like someone's directly injecting that. Have you ever seen that TikTok video of the kid screaming, "I want to go to war. I want a lightsaber"?
No.
That kid, I want to go to war. I want a lightsaber. Like that kid. It's that the music kicks on and you're immediately like, I want to fucking just do that.
Murder boner, the game.
Right. Yeah, it is. It's the testosterone boner, the testosteroner. It's sort of like the first Expendables movie. You remember when the first Expendables movie came out and there hadn't been like a true successor to the 80s action movie yet?
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's just over the fucking top.
And it
2016 Doom 2016 was kind
of
of
kind of mostly delivered on that. I feel like it could have been a little more explosion and death, but like
that's why I think that even though the sequels are very good and probably better in most ways,
I didn't
God
actually
of War,
see
for God of War, I would actually say that because 2018 was such a fresh take on God of War, that there was any sort of emotional impact hit you doubly hard.
Yeah.
In Ragnarok, the emotional impact is there, but it's sort of expected.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't quite hit you. I actually sort of thought about this with the Wolfenstein games when they brought them back, like the new Colossus and the Old Blood. And they all sort of run together now in my mind where like I'm not sure which one has what, I did in my head, I can't tell which one happened when.
Well, 2 is the one that happens in Trump's America. I mean America. Because it had that really that diner scene thing they showed at E3.
Right.
So I think I remember 2 having that sort of what the fuck moment.
Yeah, I know that 2 had that stuff in America. I can
there was
sort
the
of parse it,
American one.
but in terms of gameplay, so when I
they're they blur in that sense,
right, it's sort of the same and it's good, but it's the same. And something that I was thinking about with a sequel, I think there has to be 2 big leaps between the original and a sequel for you to make the sequel a true hit. One, graphically, it has to graphically or narratively. We're now in that sort of limbo where graphics can't leap anymore.
Right, but you know what it can do is you can really change. It goes sideways. You can really change the art.
Right.
So the here's an example, color theory, right? Where the color you kind of associate with game 1 go to an opposite color for game 2.
Right.
As sort of the dominant color of the game. So if you can't do anything graphically different to differentiate it, I would say well then kind of try to have a color, a standout color, a primary
update
color.
The style. Yeah.
Something like that. It doesn't have to be drastic or anything, but I to me, I'm well, what do you do in that scenario? I'm color, try to make the color theory different. And not color theory, but I would say, and for a lot of people who didn't play either game, it probably looks the same to them. As someone who beat Horizon 1 and 2, 2 has a distinction to me because 2 did something where it's okay, so how do you up your game? How do you differentiate? And it probably didn't to the outside observer. It really didn't. But you know what I remember? I remember 2 more than I remember 1 for the fact that 2 had that moment, oh fuck, you can fly now.
Right.
And oh fuck, you can dive underwater now.
You have an enhancement of layers. There's a new layer added. I definitely think that that's something that a sequel has to do too. The other thing is I think the narrative should always expand or you should have some sort of expansion to the game, not necessarily in scope, right? Because if you're playing I don't know, for example, a detective game, you don't necessarily want it to suddenly become open world. No, I still want a driven detective game. What I mean though is the narrative should expand in the sense of characters are better thought out now, or there's some new layer to it is what I want from a sequel. And playing Mass Effect, where it's from Mass Effect 1 to Mass Effect 2, the graphics are just
big leap. That's one generation, the same generation, but it's because 1 didn't really look that good.
1 does not look good, but 2, the game has Mass Effect 2 then has like real style. Mass Effect 1 has like a very bland,
Yeah.
concrete block.
And I just remember there being just more color in general in 2.
Yeah, 2 is just has like more just general style.
More vibrancy.
The armors look cooler, the weapons
Yes.
look cooler,
Yeah.
like everything's just like
The
expanded.
weapons and like the weapon effects, everything looks a little just snazzier.
The narrative and the universe that you can explore is expanded.
Well, some argue that like, well, they kind of took exploration out of Mass Effect 2, though.
Well, you don't land on every fucking planet anymore.
Right? You don't get to roam around on the moon rover, and the counter argument's always like, well, that really didn't amount to much
Yeah,
at
it
all.
sucked.
And for some people are like, yeah, but I like the ability, like having the ability, even if it wasn't like the most enthralling thing ever. And that's kind of where like it gets into like the sort of nerd shit thing where it's just kind of like people wanted that No Man's Sky experience before No Man's Sky.
Right.
They wanted that sort of like I could drive around even if it's just a big empty rock. And I'm like, well, like congratulations, you have like the realistic space exploration thing. And that's funny because it's kind of what Andromeda was supposed to do, was sort of like go back to the rover exploration heavy aspect of 1. And I mean, and that game fucked up in every possible way for many other reasons.
Well, my question now is like, did they fix it? Like, if you go get it now, is it not a big pile of shit?
From what I understand of a Mass Effect aficionados, yes, Andromeda did go through significant patches and fixes.
So is it worth playing now?
It's definitely stable. The problem is now is kind of like, can you gel with the new cast? That's kind of like where it kind of like boils down to now. Like, do you vibe with the new cast of characters? Because, and that kind of like is like the harsh thing where which again, this is kind of unique to Mass Effect in a way, because it had a strong core cast of characters, right?
Right.
Which a lot of Western RPGs I feel kind of don't, because again, they're going for that fucking true tabletop D&D experience where it's like we want to have a billion variables, so like obviously no one's ever going to be that fleshed out, or fleshed out in the way a Mass Effect character might be. So you get that weird thing where it's like it's hard for me to attach. It's kind of like something I remember people having this issue when Final Fantasy 8 came out, where they're kind of like, can't really get attached to this character. You're so attached to 7 characters, and then 8 comes out and it's a whole new cast, whole new world. And it's like, man, I don't know, I just don't know attach. I'm like, well, it's because 8's cast is way more fucking bland than 7's. Like, that's me, but
yeah, and that is saying something though, because a lot of 7's cast isn't that fucking interesting. Like, there's good.
I kind of disagree. I kind of think the reason 7 is one of the best Final Fantasies is because its central cast is good. They're not deep. They're just good. Like, they're just kind of like good.
But there's a few characters in 7 that really carry the rest of the characters. Like, there's not a lot of characters that people give a shit about. There's just a few that people really fucking love.
I mean, you got like, well, I don't know, because Cloud, Tifa, Aerith, Barrett, Red 13 are like they're like great.
Yeah.
Kate, Sith, Sid, not really. They're kind of weak links. Yuffie and Vincent are the optional, and they actually have a lot of story and stuff, but they're optional characters.
Right.
You could go through the whole game and never talk to them, kind of thing. So you've got like this really strong core cast of 5 characters. Although Red 13 kind of really, it's funny, he kind of loses his relevancy to the plot after you do his side questing a bit.
But everybody loves Doggo.
Yeah, I mean, he has like a tragic backstory and all his jazz, and Barrett's is really good, but again, his kind of background gets resolved fairly early, at least in the original game. So,
right.
But no, like they're a good core cast of characters, and it's like the problem is like you have the cast of 8 and they suck. It's just why 8 was never as popular as 7.
Well, the only person I remember from 8 is Squall, and he's pretty mayonnaise, but he at least looks cool.
Yeah, it's 16 all over again.
Who's the fucking villain? How dare you? Who's the villain in 8? I can't remember the villain in 8. He's like a blonde dude, isn't he?
Oh, well, no, that's your rival. That's Cypher. Cypher. He's just your rival. Like,
yeah, it's been too long since I played
Adicia, the Time Witch Sorcerers or whatever, is like the real villain.
That's the real problem with Final Fantasy. There's always a real villain. There's always a villain
They're like,
two-thirds of the way
yeah,
through the
yeah, and that's kind of the problem with 9, where it's like the real villain doesn't show up until you've literally beat the last boss, and then a fucking random ass thing appears, and he's the real villain the whole time. Like, who? Like, oh, I'm sorry, did you not want to have like a random twist villain at the 11th and a half hour of the game?
That's another thing that I was thinking about with like a really good sequel has to have a villain that expands on the first game's villain in a way. Like, well, it depends on the game or the type of story and stuff that you're having. But like, if you're going to have a game like Mass Effect, something that I think it's done well, at least so far, is like the Reapers, this galaxy ending force. In Mass Effect 1, you fight one, right? And it is a fucking crazy boss. In 2, they're sort of hinting that you're fighting like all of its minions and trying to like there's several times where you delay the actual like invasion, and then 3 it starts with the invasion. But like in 2, I was at first sort of disappointed because like you fight a Reaper in a base and it's just like a chained up growing thing.
Yeah.
Basically, you're not really like fighting. It doesn't seem like it's a bigger deal, but because there's way more characters on the line of dying, like there's way more chances for characters that you've been like building relationships with to die, it feels more epic than Mass Effect 1. Even though technically in scope it's not really all that much more epic. 3 so far overall feels like, man, you want urgency. That's all it seems they want you to
Yeah,
do.
because I
They
remember
don't
the
want
game
you to do any side.
starts with like the invasion and shit.
Yeah,
I remember that about
Earth is
3.
getting killed off, and like they're like, "Hey, you got to go get help and be quick about it." And then
Yeah.
it's all like, "Oh, but also since you're out there, could you go pick up groceries?" Like, there's these fetch quests, side quests type things where they're like,
Yeah.
"Stop over at this thing and fight pirates." Fuck pirates, dude! Like, I gotta.
Well, here's a real question. Maybe this could be a whole episode later on or something. Is just villains in general, and it's like
Yeah.
there's rarely do you have great villains in gaming anymore, because you can have a villain you love to hate, a villain you hate to love, like, or you can just have, this is the villain, you
Well,
kill them, good
oddly
job.
enough, speaking of like God of War Ragnarok earlier, you think about like the villain in Ragnarok, Odin, and how he's not really like he doesn't come off as a villain when he's a manipulative father figure.
Yeah.
Like that's actually kind of a pretty good villain, like foil for dad of war who is the ultimate rip you in half, fuck you.
Yeah, it really is. And like it's kind of funny how they try to like play that off with like, oh, like Atreus is like trying to like work with him, like double cross him, but at the same time he's kind of getting warmed over by him, kind of
Yeah.
thing. So it's kind of like this like the two dads, and like one's kind of like, you think one's maybe stealing his kid away from the other, and it's just because, and like, wow, Odin kind of, no, because Odin's a manipulative fuck.
Yeah, he's a real piece of shit, that guy. They do it well, and I do actually think that Odin, like that's another sequel that steps it up, right? But by nature of Norse mythology, they sort of had that built in.
Yeah, it's kind of like this problem too, where it's like, okay, that doesn't follow Norse mythology to a T or anything like that, but like the characters are true enough to themselves that what's going. Your brother called like Baldur like immediately.
Yeah. He
And
knew who it was immediately, yeah.
And then he immediately figured out, okay, so you're gonna like fucking shoot this dude with a mistletoe arrow at some point, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And like Odin was like, oh, Odin's here. He's a fucking manipulative, he's a little manipulative shit. So you knew he was gonna be manipulative at some point, and then you had to get rid of him. It kind of reminds me, like, there's like a movie that's out right now that's bombing hard, and the problem with the movie is, one, that it's another trailer tells a whole movie, but also like the title of the movie tells a whole movie. It's called The Last Voyage of the Demeter, which is
I
like,
don't know why it's bombing because there's no marketing. It's
no,
fucking great.
I didn't even know the movie existed until like a couple weeks ago.
Yeah,
like,
they haven't done any marketing at all.
But it's like, oh, it's that sequence from the very first Bela Lugosi Dracula film, where he gets on a boat and sails to England. But they just made a whole movie out of it. And I'm like, so everyone fucking dies, and the only guy left alive is the guy who goes crazy or whatever. I'm like, I think I know where this story goes. I don't need to. I guess I don't need to see this movie.
Wait a second. It's not a sequence from the Bela Lugosi movie. It's a sequence from the fucking novel.
Sure,
And it's
but
based on the captain's log. And the Bela Lugosi movie doesn't do it very much justice.
No, it doesn't. But like, it's kind of like because in that movie, it's so quick. Like it happens really fast. But it's like, oh, so that sort of moment, where like the ship showed up and everyone was dead. Okay, I guess I know how this goes.
And the captain ties himself to the wheel with his logbook to make sure that someone gets the warning.
It's kind of one of those weird things where it's kind of like cool, but like it's very much like the Thing prequel. They made a prequel to the Thing,
right? And you're like, about I know what's going to happen
about the Norwegian base, and it's like, cool. Well, the horror movie where everyone dies, and you know that from the beginning. Like, and you know how it ends because it flows into the next film.
Yeah, but I don't need. If the story's good enough, I don't need to not know the end. Like, just because you know the ending doesn't mean you know the story.
Right, but I guess that kind of like puts a damper on things a bit, where it's kind of like, and I kind of had that a little bit with God of War, where it's kind of like I'm waiting for the shoe to drop.
Everybody should go see The Last Voyage of the Demeter. It's the exact mid-range film that we want to make a comeback. It is nothing but character actors just chewing on like their characters. It is exactly the type of movie you want to see, and it's a movie.
If the strikes keep going the way they are, it's going to be A24 films only next year.
For people that don't know, The Last Voyage of the Demeter is about the ship's doctor. The ship's doctor is the main character. He gets onto the ship for the voyage from Romania to England, and the ship has been paid a bonus if they get there in 5 weeks. Well, there's enough crewmen for 5 weeks. let's put it that way. And Dracula is a passenger. It's good. It's a good, fun horror movie. Like, like a lot of it, Dracula is not CGI. A lot of people were like, I'm not going to see this bullshit with a CGI Dracula. It's a dude in a suit, and he looks fucking great.
Well, when he's flying, I'm sure it's CG.
Well, yeah, sure.
Obviously.
Go see that movie. I want everyone to see it just because it's.
But yeah,
it's fun.
But you have to admit, there's a problem there when it's like, here's a story that you know the ending to.
No, because the ending's only one part of the story.
Sure, to you, maybe as a writer. And this is why I always get in the argument with Kenny, because he's like, you spoil everything. I'm like, well, I want to see the execution, not necessarily the twist. But I think it can put a damper on some people. Where it's like, you go to see a movie that's going.
If you go to see a movie or a play that's classified as a tragedy, you know it's going to end tragically. Just because you know the ending doesn't mean that.
Right, and we've kind of had it out too, where I was kind of like, I'm like, oh my god, that ending in Infinity War. I'm like, what ending? Oh my god, they killed everyone. No, they didn't. They're all contractually obligated. They filmed
back.
They all contractually. They're not dead. Like what? And then I was like, what the fuck? I'm like, what? They're on payroll. Of course, they're being paid to be in the next film, so they're going to be in the next film. What you sad
it's
about?
A Marvel movie. No one ever actually dies.
No one's ever really gone.
Yeah. It's just fucking but no, I do agree that like when you have a sequel, you have to have like a jump in villains. Like the sequel's villain, often I think the pitfall is like, how do you have a villain that beats the first game's villain? Well, we're gonna make them bigger, or there's gonna be 2 of them now. Yeah, it's like that's often the thing. And so
I think like sometimes you just want to go in a different direction rather than trying to one up what you had. Is it that'd be the smarter thing to do? You can't always do that though. That's the other problem. You can't really. Not every game and every game story kind of like feeds into that loop. Like
Horizon is an interesting example because they did the right thing, in my opinion, the wrong way.
Yeah, I think I
Like,
know. I think I get what you're saying too, because like,
where it's like you have a character that was a part of the first game, technically. They did reference them in the first game,
yeah,
and it's a good moment to be like, whoa, what the fuck? These people are
yeah.
coming back. Like, they did the right thing, but then they made them the lamest motherfuckers ever.
You just fight Space Bezos.
Yeah, like it's just the execution just like they fell a little short. The game's fantastic, and I would never tell anybody, you're not going to like the villain, so don't play the game. It's really just that last 5 or
It's a bit of
6%
a
where you're
it's
like,
a bit of a downgrade at the end. I'm like, okay, yeah, and
but the rest of the
I
game's
know
great.
exactly what you're saying, and it's the same thing with me and like Xenoblade, where like Xenoblade 1, the first villain is like, okay, you're just fighting someone who had unchecked ego for way too long, and a
Right.
bit and power. Sure. The second game has like the best villains in gaming, and the third game is a huge letdown. Um, because you're just fighting physical manifestations of anxiety. Um,
Man,
like philosophically, I kind of get what they're going for, where it's like, because and someone actually made up a really good point. Three is actually a metaphor for the proletariats versus the bourgeois or whatever. Like three is actually a Marxist like tale, and I'm like, I didn't think about it, and it makes total sense when you do. And I'm like, oh, that's actually really cool, but still, like the origin of the villain is stupid. Like,
well, that's pretty in line with. No, all right, never mind. But
well, the whole it's just a whole idea is that you had a bunch of
do you beat the final villain with an ice pack on your chest?
no.
Hey, for my anxious babies out there, that works. If you're having a little bit of an anxiety attack, put a put a fucking ice pack on your chest, or there's a couple of different tricks, but the ice pack on the chest one, and then you just focus on that
Yeah.
cold sensation.
I guess like
Oh
the
yeah,
idea is like it's
nice.
kind of interesting where it's like what if you digitized a bunch of people's like brains, when you were basically your idea was that like, okay, we're gonna have a like, imagine if you will a comet, a dinosaur ending comet's coming. So we have to digitize people and then we're basically gonna like put you back and we're gonna clone the machines will reactivate, clone your body, and then we'll put your consciousness back, into a new body, after we got through this whole world ending event, right? But then a bunch of people like Ghost in the Shell style, like too much of the consciousness were like too worrying about this. So they're just like, how about we just keep time like just in this frozen stasis here. We just keep it like this forever kind of thing. Cause that way we never have to deal with the world ending event. We'll just stay here, in this, in this setting here that we built this cage for us.
Huh.
So it's like it's not bad. I like the philosophy behind it, but it's like, what is this character? They're just the physical manifestation of anxiety. I'm like, fuck.
That's one artist really working against their demons.
Fuck. I'm like, oh, we had good, well-rounded, like realistic villains. We gotta go bonkers for three. No, dude.
I just love that reaction where someone like says something you think it's going to be good and you're just like fuck. Fuck.
Well, it was Sadler, I should say. That's a great fucking sideways pivot from Wesker.
Right.
Wesker's everyone's favorite still, but Sadler's pretty fucking good, at least in the original game. He kind of sucks in a remake. Let's be real. Just because he just has so fewer lines.
He's just less goofy, but he has more backstory in the remake, doesn't he? Like they give him that
He
whole
has it has backstory, but he himself physically has less lines, less cutscenes, less presence.
yeah.
So you lose a lot of the impact of the character, um, in a sense. But like he's a good pivot, because you have Wesker and it's classic. And so what are we gonna do? Well, let's do this crazy. Let's do this nut jobs, thing. It's like cool. And I think it works really well. Um, and then like it's funny in a sense because of how beloved Wesker was, how beloved four was, and the villains in four, all the villains in four were really. And people definitely remember 7 and 8, and well, like no one remembers 6. God, fucking
Simmons.
terrible villain Simmons in 6. Oh God, and then his assistant who turned into Clonata. Terrible. People
Clada.
and people Clay. People remember 7 and 8, but like I don't think anyone like fondly like God, Evelyn was such a good villain in 7.
Well, see, I don't even think of Evelyn as the villain of 7. I
And
always
she's
think,
kind of not. It's
yeah.
just it's really Lucas is closer to the main villain more than anything, but
Um,
it's just
it-
nebulous virus and evil corporation allowed it to happen. And like 8, no one really nobody fucking remembers Miranda. They remember fucking Lady D because they're horny. Like that's all they
and
remember.
Beneviento.
Well, people who play the game remember Beneviento for being a great fucking sequence, but
Yeah.
like as far as like a character goes, she's mostly it's a spooky horror sequence. It's not really a character.
Yeah,
So
you think
much.
she's hot under that veil? I don't know. Not like Lady D.
And people kind of remember Heisenberg because he references fucking Chris and 5.
Well, I also I only remember Heisenberg because for some reason he reminds me of Devil May Cry. Like a lot of like the way his character looks
his
is like straight up.
isms and I agree.
Devil May Cry.
Yeah,
It's just-
definitely. But does anyone remember the Hunchback Fish Man? I don't even remember his
yeah,
fucking name.
more. It starts with an M. Moreau.
Moreau, yeah, I think so. Yeah. But Lady Miranda, it's like that's the technical villain of the game, and it's a way better last boss fight than 7. But does anyone remember this villain much? Nope.
Yeah, I got to be honest with you. I did not. I totally had forgotten about her.
Exactly. So
Mother Miranda.
like here's the other weird thing too. I think 8 falls into that category where like maybe less so, but I think 8 is in every way, shape, and form a better fucking game than 7.
But 7's more memorable.
7's more real because it was the big fucking pivot change in that
Right.
crazy demo and all the hype leading up to it. And 8, you know, 8 is so much better, but like most people remember 8 for tall lady step on me.
Well, I think my favorite thing about 8 compared to 7 is that I liked the setting way more in 8.
Oh fuck yeah,
Like
yeah, right.
7 was cool, kind of like if the bayou was the entryway to some other big compound or lab or something more memorable than a fucking boat.
Yeah.
7 would be great.
Yeah,
but
I
like
think the
being on a
payoff
small
maybe
bayou is a little bit hard.
Yeah, and 7 peters out at the end where 8 doesn't peter out. 8 goes ballistic
Builds.
at the end.
Yeah.
which is also pretty awesome. But yeah, that kind of gets into that weird thing where it's like we've had a number of sequels recently that you could argue are just better games than the games that preceded them in every single way, but for some reason they're not as memorable and that is because I guess that's just the natural occurrence of pivoting your gameplay so much.
Well, actually, I think this is this is a hell of a topic for the last 10 minutes of the episode, but people have been talking about in movies like fatigue, superhero fatigue. And actually what I think it is I think it's IP fatigue.
Yeah.
I think like we just don't like you're on number 8 of Resident Evil. Like it can be one of the best fucking games ever, but man, maybe I'm just sort of fucking tired of the same IP.
Well, I think the other problem with 8 in a sense was that it went like 7, 2, 3, 8 year like on schedule year to year.
Right. And it's just burnout on hitting the same fucking franchise over and over and over again. Like it's just IP fatigue.
Doom didn't have that issue too much because it's like it's Doom 2, you know, the ultimate and final versions of those, and then Doom 3.
Right.
And then Doom kind of just went away for a long time, right? And Doom 3 was this weird survival horror pivot.
And I actually like Doom 3 a lot. I'm one of the
Doom
few.
3 has its fan. It's kind of one of those like things like, look, if you like survival horror, you'll probably like Doom 3.
Yeah.
If you're in it for the Twitch arcade, obviously not. But God of War, there is kind of a little like Resident Evil. Now, God of War got a break for sure, but like there's 10 God of Wars now, I think.
Right.
There's the original trilogy, Ascension, 2 PSP games, and then now the other 2 games. So we're on the 8th God of War.
Yeah, and I think they made a good choice where they were just like, hey, we're just gonna end it here. We're gonna finish this off. We're not gonna try and get another third game out of this
out of the
fucking
Norse area, and I thought
right.
that was I thought that, damn, that's that's a good call. And like, it's like one of those things like, look, these games are taking so long to make now. It's like we need to do it now. We're gonna be fucking old.
Yeah,
You know.
they're gonna be burned out as much as we're gonna be burned out. Like it's just, I do think that in all creative aspects, people are getting burned out of just like continually driving an IP into the dirt.
Hmm.
You know, I'm really I'm just that's why Last Voyage of the Demeter, I'm like, hey, go fucking see this make mid-budget
It's
movies a thing again.
technically an IP film, though.
Yes, but it is a fresh take on like they could have remade all of Bram Stoker's Dracula. They could have like tried no, they made a niche horror film out of basically the scariest part of the book. They took the scariest part of the book and expanded it into its own, monster film
Is it the scariest part of the book?
oh yeah, fuck yeah.
You think so?
Of Bram Stoker's Dracula. It is
Not like the beginning part.
no, it's the only part of the book that's like outright truly horror.
Mm.
And it's a monster horror.
Mm-hmm.
There's scary moments in all parts of Bram Stoker's Dracula, and I guess it's been years since I've read it, but that's the part that generally is like truly just creepy fucking, horror.
Yeah.
I think stuff like that, yes, it's IP and, it's
And you know what's really interesting thinking about all this, though? You know who actually kind of does this right?
who?
Nintendo. And I'll be honest, like, because they have their sort of, we usually do one game per console.
Console gen. Yeah.
One game. And now they don't all, that's not true of every franchise, obviously. And Ubisoft talked about this recently in their sort of depressing conference call where they said we made a mistake by making Sparks of Hope on the same system. Because Sparks of Hope really kind of like undersold expectations, but who knows what, I don't know what they were. But anyways, he was saying we should have taken a page out of Nintendo's playbook and held off on the sequel to Mario Rabbids for the next system. Some people took and ran that. I was like, oh, the next system was right around the corner. They rushed it out. It's like he didn't say anything about when. He was just saying, generally speaking, we should have waited for the next system to do a sequel to Mario Rabbids. And I kind of agree, although, I have other things to say about that game in specific. But
that's not the game. Like I think that's really important for a Mario game or a Zelda game or, but if you're like XCOM doesn't need to wait until the next generation to release another XCOM game.
Right.
Like
Mario and Zelda being the outliers of this idea, because there's like multiple 2D, there's multiple 3D. Although it's like, even now, even with saying that, it's like there's one port, one new game for 2D and 3D. Both got a port from Wii U, both get a new game exclusive to Switch. So you can argue that like they still only do. Mario Kart is just like one port, sells 50 million copies. We don't need to make another Mario Kart. Zelda gets two. And that's because Zelda 1 sells so well. And it's like, what are they going to do? They have to do something, right? And even now, you still have people kind of arguing that, like, as fresh as as much as they added to Tears of the Kingdom, even some people are like, yeah, but I do feel a little fatigued. And I think Tears is selling great. It's not going to go down in any sort of disappointment sales-wise, of course not. But I do think the mind share of Tears of the Kingdom is going to follow a similar trajectory as Resident Evil 8 and God of War Ragnarok and Doom Eternal, which is beloved fucking game. We don't have anything bad to say about it, but it didn't stick as hard as Breath of the Wild because it's a follow-up to Breath of the Wild rather than we're introducing an open world Zelda game for the first time.
It's not necessarily going to be memorable over, it's not going to be a cultural touchstone.
Yeah.
Which a lot of Zeldas end up being.
Yeah. And I do think though, like for like doing the sort of one Animal Crossing, one Mario Kart, per generation actually kind of works because it avoids the franchises feeling
Fatigue.
burned out.
Yeah.
And it's funny Ubisoft says that, but it's like, now here's 10 more Assassin's Creed games all in
Right.
development at once.
Yeah, they'll all be coming out within a year of each other. Great.
Yes. Like what it's like, I've learned this. I will not follow what I've learned. I've learned nothing in a sense.
Well, you don't necessarily know that guy is the guy who decided for 4 Assassin's Creed. Probably is, but who knows? My very first screenwriting teacher that I ever had, guy named Ron Mita, he said something that I have yet to see disproven in my own experiences. You'll meet creative executives and producers who know exactly what they're talking about, who are brilliant, who have all the right ideas, who always make the right call, and they will be fired almost immediately, or they will not get to make any of the decisions they should be making. And you will sit there and wonder, whatever happened to that guy? You'll never see him again. It's like, you will meet some brilliant executive. He just doesn't last.
Well, and we didn't get into it really in this episode. Maybe we'll do it next time. And the reason for that is because one disappointing sales result will just kick a person out, and in the gaming industry shuts the studio down now.
Well, I think it actually comes down to all the people around those people want to get rid of the squeaky wheel. They don't want to they want to get rid of the person who's telling them they're wrong.
Yeah. Well, and it's also like, we're talking about two mediums. These are artistic mediums,
Right.
that the people with money want to make a science out of.
Right. They want to print money. They don't want to risk anything.
Like, the people holding the money are looking for a scientific formula in an artistic field, and they're kind of like, and they treat it as such, which means the minute something isn't a success, get rid of that. That is, we scientifically have proven this is wrong. We'll try something else, and then as long as something is successful, that's the scientific winning formula. Keep going back to that person, and it's like, it's an artistic field. Sometimes shit hits, sometimes it fucking doesn't.
I'm unfortunately blanking on his name. I think he was the head of Fox who made that deal with George Lucas to get Star Wars made. Sort of a famous deal. And after the deal got made, they threatened getting rid of his job because he was taking a risk on George Lucas and taking a risk on Star Wars. And then after Star Wars was a huge hit, they threatened him with losing his job because he gave a deal basically to, like, George got to own a bunch of the distribution rights. So like Fox could have owned everything, but in order to limit risk, the only way he could sell to the board was he limited risk by basically splitting distribution with George himself. And then after it was the biggest hit in the world, they were like, "You're the biggest fucking idiot ever. Why didn't you take all the rights?" It's like, you can't win. But he basically had this this thought where he told George, he's like, "Well, if this is the one you want to make, we'll make this one for you, because every artist needs to make one for themselves and then one for the commercial market. One for the bean counters, and then one that we can sneak in there just for us. One that we can, like, absorb the hit if it's not a big hit."
Yeah.
And then in this interview, he's like, "The ones that you do for you are almost always the one that becomes cult classics or cultural touchstones. And, like, no one ever remembers the bean counter bullshit that did well, but, like, isn't, like, nobody thinks back on it and goes like, oh, it was a huge hit and it's a cultural touchstone." It's like nobody had seen that until Steven Spielberg started working. No, there wasn't like Jaws happened and people were like, "Oh, it's a cultural touchstone. It changed movies forever." It also was a huge fucking blockbuster hit, and no one had ever seen that before. Funnily enough, the guy who found Spielberg and took a chance on him had to fight with every other creative executive and like all the bean counters because he hired Spielberg based on his short film Amblin. which is where his company gets
The
its
company
name
name
from.
comes from.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where it's like it's an artistic field, and the bean counters are looking for a scientific formula.
Right. They just that's why they love the idea of AI. You know, they want to be able to like
Yeah, right.
type in input print money, and AI is like, here's a great idea. Like, oh, okay.
Oh my
Don't have to
god,
worry
yeah.
about it.
Can you? Oh my god, what a terrible future. Like, and honestly, like it's going to happen to the game industry too. People are going to find ways to like try to like have AI design,
Mhm.
not even just code, but like design.
Yeah,
So
they'll
that's what they really want. Well, I think and what every single major publisher on the fucking surface of this planet, including Nintendo or whatever your other beloved one, any other publisher, what they want is they would love to have a game that's a live service title that
cost
prints
them nothing.
costs them nothing, is auto updating itself. You're buying a subscription to the game, you're buying battle passes, you're buying weekly microtransactions. Like, we're going to introduce new costumes every week, and it's going to be enticing enough that you're going to want to buy it. And they want you put you in an ecosystem where you are playing the game like you are buying food.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you are just constantly, daily, weekly putting money, like any amount of money into said product forever. And in fact, they even want it to be so much so they wouldn't even care if you play it. In fact, they'd even love it if you didn't, or maybe if you did. But it's I either want you FOMO'd out the fucking ass, so you're constantly trying to put money in like it's food, or I've put you into the system where you forgot you fucking subscribed to this thing like a gym membership.
Yeah.
And you're just feeding me money every month, and you don't even know you're doing it.
Yeah, they love shit like that.
That's the end goal. They don't want to pay people. They don't want to have a huge studio. They would love it if it was just a small thing. They would love it if it was like a fucking couple of dudes that started this thing, and then it's going and AI's running it. We fire them. Goodbye. We own the IP. You get no residuals. And the AI is going to constantly update, and you're going to constantly feed into a subscription fee and a microtransaction weekly FOMO thing over and over and over. And that's what they fucking want. That's what Bobby fucking wants. That's where Bobby gets his erection off of.
And it's depressing. And on that note, ended on a real downer with how whoever is the first person to make an AI game, if it's not like the most mind-blowingly good fucking thing ever, which I sort of doubt that an AI constructed game can be, I think it kills it right then and there. If it's an absolute waste of fucking time. Because the one thing the bean counters also will not do is take another chance. They never take second chances.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They don't tolerate failure in any way, shape, or form.
But on that note, we have patrons to thank. If you're interested in becoming a patron at any level, please check out patreon.com/YoVideogames podcast. Dude of the week was Machuzu. I almost said Mutton Chops Johnson because I was looking at his name right here.
I was about to say Machuzu. It reminds me of Guacamole for some reason.
Oh, see, it reminds me of a Pokemon.
Because they had the Chuzu statues, which obviously Chozo. Remember, they're called Chuzu statues in Guacamole. So Machuzu reminds me of that, and that's a great game, and I like that.
Everybody, like, the name makes us happy, and that's why we picked it. But we have producers to thank. Mutton Chops Johnson, the Pink Hammer, the Schmidt One, Screwnami, Croy 35, Hyper Viper 89, Ziggy Z, and Online Persona. Thank you, dudes. We'll catch you next time.
Later, dudes.